The galaxy was old, older than most beings could imagine. Stars had been born and died 1,000 times over. Empires had risen and fallen like waves on a cosmic shore. But through all of it, one rule had remained unchanged. Never touch a human. It was the first thing children learned on every world. Before they learned to count. Before they learned to read. Before they learned anything else, they learned the rule. Parents whispered it to their babies. Teachers repeated it in classrooms. Signs displayed it in every space station, every trading post, every corner of the known universe. No one questioned it. No one needed to. The rule simply was. Cam Minho had lived with the rule his entire life. He was 32 years old, born on Earth, but raised among the stars. His father had been a cargo hauler before him, and his father before that. Humans had been working the trade routes for generations, moving goods from one end of the galaxy to the other. They were good at it. Humans were reliable workers. They showed up on time. They did not complain. They kept their heads down and their hands to themselves. The galaxy needed humans, even if the galaxy feared them. Minho worked on Orbital Prime, a massive space station that floated at the crossroads of 12 major trade routes. The station was home to over 2 million beings from hundreds of different species. There were the tall Velkari with their silver scales and cold yellow eyes. There were the tiny Prill, no bigger than human children, with soft blue fur and voices like bells. There were the merchants of Kos, the warriors of Brau, the singers of the void, and there were humans. Exactly 3 of them. Minho, Park Yuna, and an old man named Cho Dason. They lived in the same section of the station, a small area marked with warning signs. Humans only, no contact zone, quarantine sector. The signs made it sound like they carried some terrible disease. Maybe they did. No one had ever explained why the rule existed. It simply did. Minho woke up at the same time every day. He ate his breakfast alone in his small room. He walked through empty corridors to the cargo bay, where automated systems had already prepared his work orders. He loaded crates. He moved containers. He scanned manifests and checked shipping labels. He did not speak to anyone unless absolutely necessary. The other workers avoided him. Not with hatred. Not with anger. Just with distance. They stepped aside when he walked past. They looked away when he looked at them. If he reached for something at the same time as another worker, they would pull back their hand as if his skin was made of fire. Minho had stopped feeling hurt by it years ago. This was simply how things were. This was his life. Sometimes late at night, he wondered what it would be like to shake someone's hand, to feel the touch of another living being, to hug someone, to be held. These were things humans did with each other, of course. Yuna would sometimes pat his shoulder when he seemed sad. Old Dason would shake his hand on holidays. But it was not the same as being truly part of a community. Minho was always on the outside, looking in. There was a young Velkari who worked in the same cargo bay. His name was Torvan, and he was different from the others. He did not look away when Minho passed. He watched. He studied. His yellow eyes followed the human with an intensity that made Minho uncomfortable. Torvan was a scholar. His people valued knowledge above all else. They collected information the way others collected wealth or power. And Torvan had developed an obsession with the one thing no one was allowed to understand: humans. He spent his nights reading ancient texts. He searched through forgotten databases. He watched recordings of human behavior from across the centuries. The more he learned, the more questions he had. Why were humans so different? Why did they laugh and cry so easily? Why did they risk their lives for strangers? Why did they create art and music and stories that served no logical purpose? And most importantly, Why was everyone so afraid of touching them? The official records said nothing useful. The rule predated the Federation itself. It was older than written history. Somewhere in the distant past, someone had decided that humans must never be touched, and the galaxy had obeyed that command for 10,000 years without ever asking why. Torvan found this unacceptable. Knowledge should not be forbidden. Truth should not be hidden. He was determined to find answers, even if he had to break every rule to get them. He watched Minho work. He noted how the human moved with careful precision. He observed how Minho sometimes stopped to help other workers, even when they did not ask. He saw how the human smiled at the small Prill children when they passed by on school tours, even though they were taught to fear him. There was something in that human, something that the galaxy had tried to lock away and forget. Torvan could feel it, like heat radiating from a distant star. He would find the truth, whatever it cost him. Minho did not know he was being watched. He did not know that his simple, lonely life was about to change forever. He just finished his shift, walked back to his empty room, and wondered, as he did every night, why he felt so alone in a station of 2 million souls. The answer was coming, and it would shake the foundations of everything the galaxy believed. 3 months passed. Torvan continued his research in secret. He filled data tablets with notes and observations. He recorded everything about the human called Minho, the way he walked, the way he breathed, the small sounds he made when he thought no one was listening. Minho hummed. Torvan had learned this was called music. Humans made sounds that served no purpose except to express emotion. They created melodies out of thin air, rhythms from their own heartbeats. It was strange. It was fascinating. It was completely illogical. The Volcari did not make music. They communicated with precise language. They expressed ideas with perfect clarity. There was no room for emotion in their words. Emotion was inefficient. Emotion was dangerous. Emotion was human. Torvan began to wonder if that was the point had happened on a regular work cycle. Nothing special about the day. The cargo bay was busy, as always. Ships came and went. Crates moved on automated tracks. Workers scanned and sorted and loaded. A school group had come to tour the station. 20 small Prill children, their blue fur bright under the cargo bay lights. They walked in a line behind their teacher, eyes wide with wonder. Everything was new to them. Everything was exciting. Minho saw them and smiled. He always smiled at children, even though they had been taught to fear him, even though their parents had warned them about the monsters called humans. He could not help himself. Children were innocent. They did not choose to be afraid. One of the Prill children waved at him, a tiny hand covered in soft fur. Minho waved back, careful not to get too close. That was when the accident happened. A cargo loader malfunctioned. These machines were old, patched together 100 times over the years. Something broke inside. A mechanical arm swung out of control. It struck a stack of heavy crates, sending them tumbling. The crates fell toward the children. Time seemed to slow down. Torvan watched from across the bay. He saw the shadow of the falling crates. He saw the Prill children frozen in fear. He saw their teacher screaming. He saw workers diving out of the way. And he saw Minho run toward the danger, not away from it. The human moved faster than Torvan thought possible. He crossed the distance in seconds. He threw himself forward, arms raised, and caught the edge of the largest crate. The weight was enormous. Minho's feet slid on the floor. His arm shook. His face twisted with effort. The other crates crashed around him. One struck his leg. Another grazed his back. But he held on. He held the crate up just long enough for the children to scatter. Their teacher grabbed them and pulled them away. They were safe. Only then did Minho let go. he collapsed to his knees. Blood ran from cuts on his hands where the metal had torn his skin. His breathing was heavy and painful. His whole body trembled from the effort, but no one moved to help him. The workers stood frozen. They stared at the human on the ground. They saw his blood dripping onto the floor. Red drops on gray metal. A human, bleeding. A human, hurt. And still, no one moved. They were afraid. Even now, even after he had saved 20 children, they were afraid to touch him. Torvald felt something break inside his chest. It was a feeling he did not recognize. Hot and sharp, like fire in his heart. Was this what humans called anger? He walked forward. His legs moved without his permission. His mind screamed at him to stop. The rule, the ancient law, 10,000 years of obedience. But his body kept moving. Minho looked up. His eyes were tired. There was pain in them, but also something else. Resignation. Acceptance. He expected nothing from the beings around him. He had learned long ago that help would never come. Torvald reached down. His scaled hand trembled. He placed it on the human's shoulder. The universe exploded. That was what it felt like. A wave of sensation crashed through Torvald's mind. Colors he had never seen. Sounds he had never heard. Feelings he had never felt. All of it rushing into him at once, filling every empty space in his soul. He felt Minho's pain. The cuts on his hands, the bruise on his leg, the ache in his muscles. But beneath the pain, he felt something else. Relief, joy, happiness that the children were safe. A warmth that had no logical source. Minho had risked his life for beings who feared him. And he was glad he had done it. Not because he wanted thanks. Not because he expected reward. Simply because it was the right thing to do. Torvald's knees buckled. He fell beside the human, gasping for breath. His yellow eyes were wide. Tears streamed down his scaled face. Tears. The Valkyrie did not cry. They had no tear glands. It should have been impossible. But here he was, weeping like a newborn child. Minho looked at him with concern. Despite his own injuries, despite his own pain, he reached out and steadied the alien who had just broken the most sacred law in the galaxy. "Are you okay?" The human asked. Torvald could not answer. Words would not come. He just stared at this strange being, this monster that the galaxy feared, and realized that everything he had ever been taught was a lie. Around them, the cargo bay had gone silent. Every worker stared. Every camera recorded. The impossible had happened. Someone had touched a human, and nothing would ever be the same. Torvald could not stop shaking. He sat on the cargo bay floor, his hand still resting on Minho's shoulder, unable to let go. Unable to move. Unable to think. Everything was different now. The world looked different. Sounded different. Felt different. Colors seemed brighter. Sounds seemed richer. The air itself seemed alive with meaning. Minho gently removed the alien's hand from his shoulder. The connection broke, but the feeling remained. Torvald felt like a door had been opened inside him. A door he never knew existed. And through that door, light was pouring in. "What happened?" Torvald whispered. His voice sounded strange to his own ears. Softer, warmer, human. Minho looked at him with tired eyes. There was no anger there. No fear. Just a deep, endless sadness. "You touched me," Minho said simply. "Now you know? Know what? What we are." Security arrived moments later. Valkyrie officers in gray uniforms, their faces blank and cold. They surrounded the two beings on the floor. They pointed weapons. They shouted orders. Minho raised his bloodied hands in surrender. He had done this before. Humans were always suspected, always blamed. It did not matter that he had saved 20 children. It did not matter that he was innocent. He was human. That was crime enough. But Torvald stood up. His legs were weak, his mind still spinning, but he stood. He placed himself between the officers and the human. "No," he said. "This is my fault. I touched him. I broke the rule." The officers hesitated. They had expected the human to resist. They had expected violence. They had not expected one of their own to confess. Tovan was taken into custody. Minho was placed in isolation, as protocol demanded. The cargo bay was sealed. Witnesses were questioned. Reports were filed. But Torvan could not stop thinking about what he had felt. In his cell, he sat with his head in his hands, trying to make sense of the experience. His people were scientists. They analyzed. They calculated. They reduced everything to data and patterns. But this could not be reduced. This could not be measured. When he had touched Minho, he had felt the human's emotions as if they were his own. Pain, exhaustion, fear, but also something else. Something huge. Something powerful. Love. Not romantic love. Not the love between mates or family. Something bigger. A love for life itself. A love for every living creature, even those who hated him. A fierce, burning desire to protect the innocent and help those in need. The Valkyrie had no word for this feeling. They did not experience emotions the way humans did. Their minds were cold and logical. They made decisions based on efficiency and calculation. They did not risk their lives for strangers. They did not throw themselves in front of danger to save children who feared them. But now Tavan understood why humans did. He had felt it himself. That overwhelming wave of empathy that made other beings' pain your own. That connection to all living things that made their suffering unbearable. Humans felt everything. Every emotion. Every sensation. They experienced life with an intensity that would drive any other species mad. And when touched, they shared it. That was why the galaxy feared them. Tovan began to weep again. He did not try to stop himself. He let the tears flow, let the sobs shake his body. He was grieving, not for himself, for all the humans who had spent their lives alone, for all the centuries of isolation, for all the children who had been taught to fear the most loving beings in the universe. The other prisoners watched him with confusion. A Valkyrie crying. It should have been impossible. But here it was. The first visible sign that something fundamental had changed. In his isolation cell, Minho sat with his back against the wall. He knew what was happening. He had seen it before, long ago. His grandfather had told him stories. Once, humans had walked freely among the stars. Once, they had been welcomed on every world. They had shared their gift with anyone who asked. And then the galaxy had turned against them. Minho did not know the whole story. No human did. The records had been erased. The history had been buried. All they knew was the rule and the isolation that came with it. But maybe, Minho thought, things were about to change. Park Yuna came to see him through the glass barrier of his cell. She was the human ambassador, a woman of 50 with gray in her hair and wisdom in her eyes. She had spent her whole life fighting for human rights in a galaxy that did not want them. "The Valkyrie is talking," she said quietly. "He's telling everyone what he felt." Minho nodded slowly. "They will try to silence him." "Yes, but the recording is everywhere. Millions have seen it. They saw a human save those children. They saw an alien touch you and weep. They will say he is sick, that I infected him with something." Yuna smiled. It was a sad smile, full of hope and fear in equal measure. "Let them try," she said. "The truth has a way of finding the light." Minho closed his eyes. He thought of Torvan, of the tears on his scaled face, of the wonder in his yellow eyes. He thought of all the billions of beings across the galaxy who had spent their lives feeling nothing, empty, cold, alone. Maybe, just maybe, they did not have to be alone anymore. The awakening had begun. The Federation Council gathered in emergency session. They were the rulers of the galaxy, representatives from the 12 founding species. For 10,000 years, they had maintained order. They had kept the peace. They had enforced the rule. Now, everything was falling apart. The recording had spread across every network. Billions had watched. They saw Minho save the children. They saw Torvan touch him. They saw the Valkyrie scholar collapse in tears. Comments and questions flooded every channel. What happened to him? Why is he crying? What did he feel? Is the rule a lie? The council members sat in their great chamber, their faces grim. They knew what was coming. They had always known this day might arrive. The secret they had kept for 10,000 years was about to be exposed. An elderly Valkyrie named High Speaker Droth rose to address the assembly. His scales had faded with age, but his eyes were sharp. He had served on the council for 200 years. He knew the truth better than anyone. We have contained this before, he said. We can contain it again. The Valkyrie scholar must be silenced. The human must be removed. We must declare this an isolated incident. But before anyone could respond, the chamber doors opened. Security officers escorted in 3 figures. Torvan, still in prisoner's clothes. Minho, with bandages on his hands. And Park Yuna, walking between them with her head held high. You cannot silence us, Yuna said. Her voice was calm but firm. The truth is already out. High Speaker Droth's eyes narrowed. Ambassador Park, you were not invited to this session. No, but I have a right to speak. Article 7 of the Federation Charter. Any species accused of crimes against the Galactic Order may defend itself before the Council. A species accused of crimes against the Galactic Order may defend itself before the Council. The Council members shifted uncomfortably. The Charter was ancient law. They could not refuse. Droth sat back in his chair. Very well, speak. Yuna stepped forward. She looked at each council member in turn. Some looked away. Others met her gaze with cold hostility. She did not flinch. 10,000 years ago, she began, humans discovered faster than light travel. We reached the stars. We found that we were not alone. The galaxy was full of intelligent life. Different species. Different cultures. Different worlds. She paused, letting the silence stretch. We were excited. We thought we had found friends. We greeted every species we met with open arms. We touched them. We embraced them. We shared ourselves with them. Torvan stepped forward, his voice still rough from weeping. And they felt what we feel. The connection. The empathy. The overwhelming tide of emotion. Yuna nodded. Humans are different from other species. Our minds are open. Our emotions are strong. And when we touch another being, we share those emotions. We cannot help it. It is simply who we are. The council chamber was silent. No one moved. No one spoke. At first, Yuna continued, the galaxy welcomed us. Species that had never felt empathy before suddenly understood what it meant to care about others. Warriors laid down their weapons. Tyrants questioned their power. Slaves demanded freedom. The touch of a human changed everything. She turned to look directly at High Speaker Droth, and that terrified the rulers. Droth's face remained blank, but his claws gripped the armrests of his chair. The founding species of this federation were cold and logical, Yuna said. They ruled through efficiency and control. They did not understand emotions. They saw them as weaknesses. And when human touch began to spread those emotions across the galaxy, they saw it as a threat. Minho spoke for the first time. His voice was quiet, but it carried through the chamber. They were afraid. Afraid that if everyone could feel what we feel, they could no longer control them. Afraid that their empires would crumble. Afraid that everything they had built would fall apart. Yuna picked up the thread. So they created the rule. They declared humans dangerous. They spread lies about diseases and curses. They isolated us, quarantined us, taught every child to fear our touch. She spread her hands wide. 10,000 years. That is how long you have kept the galaxy cold. That is how long you have denied every species the right to feel. You did not protect them from harm. You protected yourselves from change. High Speaker Droth rose slowly to his feet. His yellow eyes burned with something that might have been anger, or might have been fear. You do not understand, he said. Emotions are chaos. They lead to war, to violence, to suffering. We brought order to the galaxy. We brought peace. You brought silence, Torvald said. His voice had grown stronger. You brought emptiness. I spent my whole life feeling nothing. I thought that was normal. I thought that was how existence was supposed to be. But now I know the truth. He stepped toward the council, and the guards moved to stop him. But he kept talking. I felt what a human feels. I felt connection. I felt care. I felt love. And for the first time in my life, I understood why I exist. He pointed at the council members. You stole that from us. From every species in the galaxy. You stole our hearts. The chamber erupted in chaos. Council members shouted. Guards moved forward. Cameras broadcast everything to a watching galaxy dot and across 1,000 worlds. Beings who had spent their entire lives feeling nothing began to wonder what they had been missing. The galaxy changed overnight. Not everywhere, not everyone. The Federation Council tried to suppress the truth. They declared Torvald mentally ill. They called the humans liars. They sent out messages claiming the recording was fake. But it was too late. The truth had escaped, and it could not be caught again. On Orbital Prime, crowds gathered outside the human quarter. Not angry crowds. Curious ones. Beings who had spent their entire lives wondering what emotions felt like. Beings who had watched the recording 100 times, studying Torvald's tears, trying to understand. Some came in fear, ready to run at the first sign of danger. Others came in hope, desperate to feel something after centuries of emptiness. They stood in silence, watching the door of the human quarter, waiting. Minho stood at the window, looking out at the crowd. His hands were still bandaged. His body still ached from the accident. But he could not rest. Not now. What do we do? He asked quietly. Park Yuna stood beside him. She looked tired. She had spent days arguing with Federation officials, giving interviews, trying to explain the truth to a galaxy that did not want to hear it. We give them what they came for, she said. We give them a choice. Old Dason joined them at the window. He was the oldest human on the station, nearly 90 years old. He had spent his whole life dreaming of this moment. My grandfather told me stories, he said, about the old days. Before the rule, humans used to walk freely among the stars. We were welcomed everywhere. People lined up to shake our hands. They said it was like waking up from a long sleep. He smiled, wrinkles spreading across his weathered face. I never thought I would see it happen again. They opened the doors. The crowd did not rush forward. They stood frozen, uncertain. 10,000 years of fear did not disappear in a moment. The rule had been drilled into their minds since birth. Touching a human was the greatest crime. The worst violation the path to destruction. But one Prill child stepped forward. She was small, even for her species. Her blue fur was bright and clean. Her eyes were wide with innocent curiosity. She was one of the children Minho had saved. She walked up to the human. She looked at his bandaged hands. She looked at his tired eyes. Then she reached up with one tiny paw. Minho knelt down. He held out his hand, palm up, letting her choose. The child touched him. Her eyes went wide. Her mouth opened in a gasp of wonder. And then she laughed. A pure, joyful sound that rang through the corridor like music. "It's warm!" she cried. "It feels like sunshine, like being hugged by the whole universe." That broke the dam. Others stepped forward. First one, then two, then 10, then 100. They reached out with trembling hands, touched human skin, and felt the walls around their hearts crumble into dust. A Valkyrie warrior wept for the children he had killed in battle. A merchant felt guilt for the customers he had cheated. A mother felt love for her children, real love, for the first time in her life. They fell to their knees. They embraced strangers. They laughed and cried and screamed with the overwhelming power of emotions they had never known existed. Not everyone welcomed the change. On many worlds, governments tried to stop it. They enforced the rule with violence. They arrested humans. They punished anyone who broke the law. But the truth kept spreading. Humans traveled to distant planets, touching anyone who asked. Some species embraced them with open arms. Others rejected them with hatred and fear. The galaxy fractured along new lines. The old order crumbled. The cold logic of the Federation gave way to the chaos of emotion. It was messy. It was painful. Many suffered as old structures fell apart. Change was never easy. But for the first time in 10,000 years, the galaxy was alive. Torvan became an ambassador for what he called emotional integration. He traveled from world to world, telling his story, showing others what was possible. The Valkyrie, who had once prized logic above all else, now wept openly at beautiful sunsets. They wrote poetry. They made music. They loved. Minho returned to his work on Orbital Prime, but everything was different now. People greeted him in the corridors. Children waved at him and asked to shake his hand. Merchants offered him goods directly, skin touching skin without fear. One day, a new human arrived on the station. A young woman named Chohana. She was a delegate, sent to help with the transition. She had kind eyes and a gentle smile. Minho watched as a Valkyrie ambassador approached her. The alien was old and dignified, a former member of the council who had changed his mind. He stood before Hana with tears already forming in his yellow eyes. "May I?" he asked. Hana nodded. She took his scaled hand in hers. The ambassador broke down weeping. Centuries of suppressed emotions poured out of him in great heaving sobs. Hana held him gently, patting his back, whispering soft words of comfort. Torvan appeared beside Minho. They watched the scene together in silence. "Was it worth it?" Torvan asked. "Your people spent 10,000 years alone." Minho considered the question. He thought of all the generations before him. His parents, his grandparents, going back hundreds of generations. All of them alone. All of them feared. All of them treated like monsters for the simple crime of caring too much. Then he looked at the ambassador in Hana's arms, at the crowds of aliens and humans walking together through the station, at a Prill child riding on a Valkyrie's shoulders, both of them laughing. "Yeah," Minho said. "It was worth the wait." The galaxy was waking up, and humanity was finally home.